They thought she was lost. They thought she was confused. They thought the woman standing in the rain outside the Radisson in downtown Ottawa, wearing a faded green jacket and carrying a single paper bag, was exactly the kind of person they were allowed to dismiss. They were wrong about every single thing. It was the second Thursday of November, the kind of cold that doesn't ask permission, the kind that walks right through your coat and settles in your spine. The Radisson on Colonel By Drive was dressed for the occasion, the lobby warm and gold-lit behind its tall glass doors, hosting the annual Governor-General's Canadian Leadership Conference Gala. Officers in pressed dress uniforms, politicians in dark suits, deputy ministers who had spent 3 decades inside the machinery of this country. The parking lot outside was lined with black government sedans. There were Canadian flags on every lamppost. And standing just outside the entrance, partially sheltered by the overhang, was Warrant Officer Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan. She wasn't lost, she was early. Her dress uniform was folded neatly inside the paper bag she carried. She had come straight from Petawawa, straight from a training exercise that had run 6 hours over schedule, and she hadn't had time to change. She wore a faded 2RTHA base jacket over her civilian clothes, muddy boots from the field, and her hair was still pulled back in a working bun that had survived the better part of 14 hours outdoors. To anyone glancing from behind a reception desk, she looked like a delivery driver who had parked in the wrong lot. To anyone who knew anything about what she had done for this country, she looked like exactly what she was. Warrant Officer Okonkwo-Brennan had served 22 years in the Royal Canadian Artillery. She had done 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 advisory mission in Mali, and had been awarded the Meritorious Service Medal for her role in training local security forces under conditions that most people in that warm lobby would not have lasted 3 days in. She was 44 years old. She was the daughter of a Nigerian-born cardiologist and a Quebecois schoolteacher from Trois-Rivières. She had joined the Canadian Armed Forces at 22 because she believed in something larger than herself. She still did. She was at the Radisson that evening because the Vice Chief of Defence Staff had personally requested her presence at the gala. She was being recognised. There was a plaque with her name on it somewhere inside that building. None of that was visible from behind a reception desk. The lobby doors slid open when she stepped toward them, and the warmth hit her like a wall. She pulled the paper bag tighter under her arm and walked toward the front desk, already calculating, find a washroom, change into the dress uniform, be presentable in 10 minutes. She had survived worse timelines. The man behind the reception desk was named Trevor Marsh. His nameplate said so. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, with the particular brand of confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from position. The confidence of a man who had decided, somewhere along the way, that standing behind a tall desk gave him authority over who deserved to walk past it. He looked at Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan. He took in the muddy boots, the paper bag, the jacket with the base logo she knew meant nothing to him. He made a decision in about 4 seconds. Ma'am. His voice had the practiced neutrality of someone who had learned to say dismissive things without technically saying anything wrong. Can I help you? I'm here for the leadership gala, Adaeze said. Her voice was level. It was always level. 22 years of military service will do that to a person. You learn to keep the temperature out of your voice, even when the situation deserves every degree of it. I need to use a changing room before the event. I have my invitation. She reached into the front pocket of the base jacket and produced a white envelope. The kind with the gold-embossed crest of the Office of the Governor-General on the upper left corner. The kind that doesn't get mailed to people who wander in off the street. Trevor Marsh looked at the envelope. He did not reach for it. The gala is a private event, he said. Ticketed guests only. We've had some issues tonight with people trying to access the venue without authorization. I have an invitation, Adaeze said again, holding the envelope forward. He didn't take it. Do you have photo ID as well? She produced her military ID. Her name, rank, base and service number were printed clearly on the laminated card. He looked at it the way people look at things they have already decided not to believe. This is a military ID, he said. Yes, Adaeze said, with the patience of someone who had explained things to difficult people under far more stressful circumstances. I'm a warrant officer with the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm an invited guest at the event your hotel is hosting this evening. Trevor Marsh set the ID back on the counter and did not slide it back toward her. He left it sitting there, in the deliberate way people leave things when they want you to feel like a supplicant. I'm going to need to verify that with our events coordinator before I can let you through to the ballroom level. That's fine, Adaeze said. While you do that, can you direct me to a change room? I've come directly from a training exercise and I need 10 minutes. Our change rooms are for registered guests. There was a pause. Not an angry pause, not a dramatic one, just the pause of a woman who had navigated minefields, real ones, choosing her next step with precision. Then verify my registration, she said. My name is Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan. I'm on your list. Trevor Marsh typed something. He squinted at the screen. He typed again. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in his expression. The faint flicker of a man who has found exactly what he was hoping not to find, and then he rearranged his face back into professional neutrality. I don't see you listed under that name, he said. Try Okonkwo, Adaeze said. Sometimes the hyphen causes issues. He typed, he looked at the screen, he looked at her. I'm not finding anything, he said. I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the lobby area while I contact the events coordinator. It may take some time. The gala is already underway. And then he added, and this was the moment, the one that would matter later. You might want to take a seat near the side entrance. We've had some complaints tonight about congestion in the main lobby. The side entrance. Not the seating area by the fireplace, where 3 men in dress uniforms were waiting with glasses of sparkling water. The side entrance, near the service corridor. Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan looked at Trevor Marsh for exactly 3 seconds. She had a particular way of looking at people, clear, unreadable, without heat, that her soldiers had described over the years as the look that tells you she's already 2 decisions ahead of you. She picked up her military ID from the counter. She put it back in her pocket. She sat down in the chair nearest to the main lobby. Not the side entrance, the main lobby, set the paper bag on her knees and waited. She did not make a scene. She had not survived 2 combat tours by making scenes at the wrong moment. Trevor Marsh watched her sit down. He made a call. His voice dropped low enough that she couldn't make out the words, but she could read the posture. Shoulders angled away, one hand over the receiver, the particular body language of a man who is describing a problem he created. He was on the phone for about 90 seconds. When he hung up, he looked across the lobby at her, with an expression she had seen before. Not quite guilt, not quite recognition. Something in between that hadn't decided which way to fall yet. She waited. 10 minutes passed. The gala was audible through the ballroom doors, the low murmur of several hundred people, the soft scrape of chairs, the discreet percussion of a catering service that knew what it was doing. Somewhere inside that ballroom, there was a plaque with her name on it. There was a Vice Chief of Defense Staff who had arrived 30 minutes ago and would eventually notice she was not in her seat. At the 14-minute mark, the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened. The man who stepped out was Brigadier-General Marcus Osi-Bonsu. He was 61 years old, immaculate in his Canadian Armed Forces dress uniform, 3 rows of medals on his chest. He was the Deputy Commander of the Canadian Army and had driven down from NDHQ specifically for this evening. He was also Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan's former commanding officer, the man who had written the nomination for her Meritorious Service Medal, and the man who had personally phoned her 6 weeks ago to tell her she was being recognized at this gala. He saw her from across the lobby. He took in the paper bag, the muddy boots, the fact that she was sitting outside the ballroom doors instead of inside. He walked toward the front desk with the particular cadence of a very senior officer who is controlling something powerful inside himself. "Excuse me," Brigadier-General Osi-Bonsu said to Trevor Marsh. His voice was quiet. In Adaeze's experience, the quieter the voice of a person in command, the worse the situation for whoever was on the receiving end of it. That woman sitting in the lobby, is there a problem? Trevor Marsh straightened. The uniform had registered. The rank had registered. "Sir, we've been working to verify her guest credentials. She presented a military ID, but we couldn't locate her in the system under the name she provided." "What name did she provide?" "Okonkwo-Brennan, sir, she said she was." "Warrant Officer Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan," Brigadier-General Osi-Bonsu said. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Recipient of the Meritorious Service Medal, 22 years of service, 2 combat tours. She is the guest of honor at the event your hotel is hosting tonight. He paused. She is the reason there is a gala happening in that room right now. Trevor Marsh opened his mouth. He closed it. Her name, the Brigadier-General continued, is on the podium inside. It is on a plaque that the Vice Chief of Defence Staff will present in approximately 40 minutes. It is on the programme that every one of your 260 registered guests received when they walked through those doors. He looked at the desk. Was it not on your list? Trevor Marsh looked at his screen. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He typed. He looked. Something moved across his face. It's listed under W.O. Okonkwo-Brennan, he said. I was searching under the full first name. The silence that followed was the kind that costs people something. Brigadier-General Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan walked across the lobby to where Adaeze was sitting. He lowered himself slightly, the way tall people do when they're talking to someone seated and want to close the distance. Adaeze, he said, I'm sorry you were kept waiting. She stood. I've waited in worse places, sir. I know you have. He glanced back at the reception desk. Let's get you a room to change. You've earned the right to walk into that ballroom correctly dressed. She followed him toward the elevators. The lobby was quiet. The 3 men in dress uniforms near the fireplace had stopped their conversation and were watching. The evening shift manager, a woman named Helene Cotte, who had been notified of the situation by Trevor Marsh's phone call and had been observing from the corridor beside the desk, stepped forward. Warrant Officer, she said. I want to personally apologize. Please allow us to offer you the use of our executive suite to change, and anything you need from the kitchen before the dinner service ends. Adaeze looked at her. Thank you. A room to change is all I need. They gave her the suite on the 9th floor. She was back in the lobby in 11 minutes. Dress uniform perfect, medals in order, posture that came from decades of discipline, and something deeper than discipline, the bearing of someone who had never needed a hotel lobby to tell her who she was. She walked through the ballroom doors. She did not look at Trevor Marsh on the way past. She didn't need to. Inside the ballroom, 260 people were seated at round tables, draped in white linen. The room went still the way rooms go still when someone walks in who commands attention without demanding it. Brigadier-General Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan led her to her seat near the front. Several people stood as she passed, not out of formality, out of something more genuine than that. The Vice Chief of Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Claire Fontaine-Brousseau, leaned across the table when Adaeze sat down. We were starting to worry, she said. Training ran long, Adaeze said. Of course it did. Lieutenant General Fontaine-Brousseau smiled. It always does with you. The dinner was served. The speeches were made. When the time came, Lieutenant General Fontaine-Brousseau stood at the podium and spoke for 8 minutes about what it meant to serve. About the people who carried the weight of commitment without asking for recognition, and about one woman in particular, who had spent 2 decades doing things in places most Canadians would never see, for reasons most Canadians would never need to articulate to themselves, because people like Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan had already done the work on their behalf. Adaeze walked to the podium. She received the plaque. She shook the Lieutenant General's hand. She turned and looked at 260 people who were on their feet. She had been in combat. She had stood in heat that made the air shimmer and given orders that determined whether people lived or died. She had attended funerals and written letters and shown up the next day because that was what you did. She did not consider herself a person who was easily moved. She stood at that podium and felt something that had no military designation. She spoke for 4 minutes. She thanked the people who had served beside her. She mentioned no names except one. A private from Moncton who had died in Kandahar in 2009 and who she said deserved to be in that room more than she did. She said that service was not about recognition, but that recognition, when it came from the right people for the right reasons, had a way of making the wait feel worthwhile. She walked back to her seat. In the lobby outside the ballroom, the evening manager Helene Cotte was having a conversation with Trevor Marsh at the front desk. It was not a long conversation. Trevor Marsh's expression changed several times during it. When it was over, he went to retrieve his jacket from the staff closet. He did not come back to the front desk that evening. He had been the front desk supervisor for 3 years at that hotel. He was escorted out by 9:45. Hélène Côté later confirmed to staff that the incident had been documented and submitted to corporate HR and to the hotel's Equity and Inclusion Review Board. 3 weeks later, 2 things were announced: a mandatory training program for all guest-facing staff at the property, and a formal letter of apology from the hotel's general manager that was delivered to Warrant Officer Okonkwo-Brennan at CFB Petawawa, signed by the Regional Vice President of Operations. Adaeze read the letter once. She folded it and put it in a drawer. She had a field exercise at 6 the next morning. Word of what had happened in that lobby, gathered from 3 different witnesses who had been present, including one of the uniformed officers near the fireplace, spread through military circles in the way that stories spread when they resonate with something people have been carrying for a long time. Comments appeared online from current and former members of the Canadian Armed Forces, many of them describing nearly identical experiences. Being mistaken for support staff at events they were honoured at, being questioned about their credentials at facilities they had served longer than the person questioning them had been employed. Being told, in language that technically said nothing wrong, to use a different entrance. Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan said nothing publicly about what had happened. She didn't need to. The story was already being told by people who had witnessed it, and by the particular kind of silence a decorated warrant officer maintains when she has seen worse and survived it and kept showing up anyway. That is the thing about people who have spent their lives in genuine service. They don't need the lobby to know who they are. They already know. They've known in places far darker and colder than a hotel in Ottawa on a November night. Trevor Marsh thought he was managing a situation. He thought the faded jacket and the muddy boots and the paper bag told him everything he needed to know. He made a 4-second decision that followed him out the door, and into a paper trail, and into a mandatory program that will carry his name in its incident report for however long institutional memory lasts. He had one moment to simply look at what was in front of him, an invitation with a gold crest, a military ID. A woman who had answered when her country called, more than once, in places where the call was not theoretical. He chose not to look. And the lobby that he thought he controlled became the room where his certainty finally ran out of road. If this story stayed with you, if you've seen someone treated like they didn't belong in a room, they had more right to be in than anyone, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe that the badge, the uniform, and the record should speak louder than the first impression, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this one, and every single one of them deserves to be heard. I keep coming back to that paper bag. Adaeze Okonkwo-Brennan walked into that hotel lobby carrying her dress uniform in a paper bag, straight from a field exercise, 14 hours into a day that most people in that ballroom couldn't have survived. And the first thing Trevor Marsh saw, the only thing he allowed himself to see, was the muddy boots and the jacket with the base logo he didn't recognize. That was it. That was the whole story he decided to tell himself in 4 seconds. What strikes me every time I think about this isn't the anger of it, though the anger is completely justified. It's the irony. The woman he chose to redirect toward the side entrance was the reason there was an event happening at all. Her name was on the podium. Her name was on the plaque. Her name was in the program sitting on every table in that room. And he looked right at her, right through all of that, and made a decision based on what she was carrying and what she was wearing instead of who she actually was. That's what happens when we stop exercising our judgment honestly. When we substitute quick assumptions for the harder, slower work of actually paying attention. Trevor Marsh wasn't necessarily a cruel person, but he was a careless one. And in positions where you hold a small amount of power over other people's access and dignity, carelessness causes real damage. It leaves a decorated veteran sitting alone in a lobby for 14 minutes while a plaque with her name on it waits inside. What Adaeze did in those 14 minutes is the part I find myself thinking about the longest. She didn't argue loudly. She didn't escalate. She sat in the chair nearest the main entrance, not the side entrance he'd pointed her toward, and she waited. That kind of composure isn't passivity. It's something harder than anger. It's the discipline of someone who has learned, through years of genuine difficulty, that how you carry yourself in the moments when you're being treated unfairly says more about your character than anything you could say out loud. 22 years of service builds something in a person that a lobby interaction cannot touch. That's what resilience actually looks like. Not the absence of hurt, but the refusal to let someone else's poor judgment determine how you move through a room. And then there's Brigadier-General Okonkwo-Brennan, stepping out of that elevator and doing exactly what integrity looks like in practice. He didn't walk past. He didn't assume it would sort itself out. He crossed the lobby, asked a quiet question, and told the truth clearly and without theatre. That's moral clarity in action, not a speech, not a confrontation, just a person who knew what was right and did it directly. The consequence for Trevor Marsh came not from any dramatic moment, but from the accumulation of his own choices. The envelope with the gold crest, the military ID. The name typed twice into a system that had it listed all along. He had every piece of information he needed. He chose not to look. That's usually how these things work. The truth doesn't hide. We just decide sometimes that we already know enough, and then one day, the elevator opens,